Hey, welcome to the podcast. Today I'm chatting with Dr. Stephen Hicks. He is a former professor of philosophy at Rockford University in Illinois, executive director for the Center in Ethics and Entrepreneurship. He has written 7 books, translated into 20 different languages. As a business ethics expert, we are discussing today the AI arms race. I really hope you enjoy it. Stephen, good afternoon. How are
Hey,
you? It's great to have you here.
pleasure to be here, Javier. Good list of questions for us to talk
That's
through.
fantastic. Um, Listen, I would like to start, if you don't mind. I play into your strengths among the many strengths you have, but
Hmm.
you've done a great job at the Center of Business Ethics. Hopefully, training a generation of business people who
Hmm.
will take into consideration that. And if you don't mind, I would like to start with something that may sound amateurish
Hmm.
for an expert like you, but for someone like me, it's pretty important. Those of us who got started uh, with ethics, with the elements of moral philosophy of Rachel's, we
Hmm.
pretty much took out of that course an ethics. It's either deontology, Kantianism, virtue ethics. I think Singer is the famous among them, and of course hedonistic consequentialism, what everybody knows as utilitarianism, which has become a bad word, but and has a long pedigree. When a business ethicist um, starts this path, is that distinction in ethics in general
Hmm.
present for a business ethicist? Is
Yeah.
there something called deontological business ethics?
Hmm. Oh, yes. Well, all of the ethical theories that you listed are used in all of the applied ethics disciplines. So you'll find people in medical ethics, in business ethics, in other forms of ethics, sports ethics, taking the abstract theories and saying this is how we would approach this subdiscipline, right? For that. Now, I am not impressed with that taxonomy. That James Rachel is a very good mainstream philosopher, but everything in philosophy is controversial, including right what the domain of ethics covers and what the major schools of ethics include. So, yeah, one of the problems that, right, though, is that most of those mainstream schools, some of them, the majority of them, formed prior to the development of modern society, prior to the development of modern economies, have made and built into their foundation certain assumptions about the nature of business. And it takes some very careful thinking by philosophers and business ethicists when they're trying to talk 21st century about deontology or virtue ethics or utilitarianism, not to smuggle in right some of those assumptions. So one that I do want to flag right from the outset, and this is one that fortunately is getting a lot of attention in this last generation, though, is the assumption that there are ethical considerations on the one side, what it is to be a good person, a virtuous person, to have a good will, to be motivated in the right way, and so forth. And that's one category of considerations. Then on the other side, we have business considerations, right? That is to say, what's going to enable us to be successful in business, what's going to make us profitable, what's going to make us practically functional. And I think that is a disaster for business ethics if one starts off with that kind of categorization scheme, because it in effect is building in a duality right from the beginning. And it sounds like from the beginning, I'm either going to choose to be a practical, successful person in the real world, or I can give all of that up, or restrain myself from doing that in order to be an ethical person. And so it builds in a kind of contradiction or dichotomy right from the beginning. And I think the more modern and the healthier way to do this, and some business ethicists are starting to work out this territory, is to go back to the beginning of business and to say, what are we trying to do? We're trying to create value in the world, right? So it's not like we are actually in the Garden of Eden and God has provided everything and all we need to do is just kind of wait for fruits to fall from the trees and then just lean over to sip water from the stream. That's not how life works. We have to make things in the world. So that fundamental moral concept of responsibility is, am I, as an individual, going to take responsibility for creating value in the world? And that's a deeply moral responsibility. Instead of being the kind of person who's going to expect other people to provide handouts, right? Or to wait for other people to make stuff and then steal from them. So on my way of approaching business, business is, to the extent it's about taking responsibility for creating value, that is an ethical commitment right from the beginning. Then, if we want to say business is not only about being productive, we do this in a social context. So I make something and you make something, and we're going to trade with each other. And that's going to involve negotiation and some advertising and maybe formalizing things in a contract and so on. But just the fact that business people are committed to trading with each other is already a moral commitment, right? Because then that's to say that I'm going to treat you as someone who's going to voluntarily enter into an agreement with me. We're going to exchange goods or exchange money for goods or time for goods. That is going to make you better off and it's going to make me better off. And so already that is a different kind of a commitment to people who are interacting with each other, playing various social power games, right? That I'm just going to dominate you and take your stuff. And that's been, of course, a huge amount of human history. Or I'm going to try to manipulate stuff out of you or make you feel guilty if you don't just give me stuff without me giving you anything in exchange. So already I want to say that's where we should start business ethics, with people who are morally committed to production, morally committed to trading with each other. And then, of course, production, trade, and the rest of human life is very complicated. There's lots and lots of new issues that are going to arise, but we don't want to go in assuming that business is an amoral enterprise or an immoral enterprise. We want to go in with kind of the thumbs up, morally speaking, on their back. Now, the other thing, and this is going to take us directly to our topic today, one feature of the modern world has been the constant innovation, that we're always, discovering new knowledge, inventing new things, bringing new things to market. And that has introduced some new kinds of ethical challenges to the modern mindset. And certainly AI and robotics is the latest in a long line of things there. But that also is something that is a challenge for traditional approaches to ethics. If you think, for example, that most of the major ethical codes were in most of the religious traditions, for example, that became very sophisticated and culturally widespread long before modern business, long before modern science and modern technology. And they conceived of ethics in a certain way, and they did not think in terms of innovation and change as being a very important thing. In many cases, they were suspicious that there's something wrong with people who want to change things, because their conception of ethics is that there are these timeless principles that have been laid down upon us from on high, and we shouldn't really question those principles too much. We just apply them to the new situation. But we also think, that human beings, the way we've been living, making stuff, we've been doing it the same way for tens of thousands of years. And so people who come along and want to change things and say maybe we even need to rethink some of those moral principles that have been built into society for tens of thousands of years, those people seem problematic and dangerous. So the point of all of this then is that in some ways we need to rethink fundamentally about valorizing production, valorizing trade, valorizing innovation. And I think business ethics as a discipline is still in the early stages of doing that. So AI and robotics are just one of those places where we feel the stress most prominently.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I get it. And actually, this is a pretty good segue to something I wanted to ask you. Is the role of a business ethicist the same when these big shifts in technology take place?
Hmm.
Um, uh, a thinker, when the steam engine came out, is he or she facing the same challenges than I don't know, one during the time of the printing press,
Hmm.
or transatlantic flight, or AI and robotics? Or
Yeah.
are we talking of a mindset that can be replicated for new eras
Hmm.
of human production?
Yeah. Well, uh, I think if we start our philosophy accurately, then it is a matter of identifying principles that we then do have to adapt to new circumstances. If we have started our philosophy with various kinds of dualities, or what I would argue are mistakes, then it's
Yes.
always going to seem that everything that is new is a challenge to our moral principles, and we're going to be very resistant to adapting our moral principles to the new circumstance. We're more likely to say that new circumstance has to go away or be stifled or retarded in some way in order to preserve the moral principles. So to take the examples that you are raising, so if you go back to the printing press in the 1400s, in one general sense, there's nothing new there. There, the value that we are talking about is information, and information being communicated to individuals. But then the debate is only going to be between those who have a healthy attitude toward information and those who have what I would argue is an unhealthy attitude toward information. So, what the printing press does is it says suddenly we can take information and make it more widespread to lots and lots of people at lower cost. But then we start to say, what is our attitude toward lots and lots of people having access to information? Now, if your ethics is, well, people need to think, people need to learn, and more information about more stuff is good for them, then right from the beginning, you're going to be celebrating the printing press and trying to accelerate this innovative technology. But at the same time, if you think, no, no, knowledge is a dangerous thing, and most people are not able to process information because they're too stupid, or they're too uninformed, or they have bad character from the beginning. And so we don't want to empower them. Instead, knowledge should be the preserve of specially trained elite individuals, right, who are going to manage the information flow in society. So that debate, right, is not about the printing press per se, right? That's a debate about information ethics, and that debate about information ethics is a more general, right, philosophical right, debate as well. So when I'm doing my philosophy, in many cases, then we're still having that debate. The internet comes along, and some people say this is great, right? All of this information available to people, and then other people are saying, but look at those people, right? They are not the kind of people who should, right, have access to information. We need to control social media and have benign censorship regimes in place, and so on. Or the other example of social interaction and transatlantic travel and transatlantic flight. Now, that then is to say people having mobility so that they can seek the meaning of life elsewhere. I can go more easily now to places where there are economic opportunities, or I can go to places where I can have religious freedom or artistic freedom, right? Or I can, if I want to be an explorer and adventurer, I can more easily have an exciting life. And in one sense, that is an old set of values: economic opportunity, religious freedom, excitement and adventure in your life. And what the new modes of transportation do is give us the ability to do so. Now, if we think, right, life should be about seeking opportunities economically, being religiously free, and having lots of adventure in your life, we're going to say this is a great thing. On the other hand, if we say people should know their place in society, they shouldn't get their expectations up too high. They shouldn't be challenging established religious doctrines and so forth. They should go along. Then you're going to say this is a bad thing, and you're going to restrain it in various ways. But then at the same time, those transatlantic communications and technologies do mean that in one way there's a new problem. People of different religions and ethnicities and races and from all over the world, once in a while they would encounter each other prior to the modern world, but it was a pretty rare phenomenon. And so for most of human history, people were, in the vast majority of their interactions, dealing with other people who looked like them, spoke the same language, had the same religious, moral, political beliefs, cultural beliefs, and so forth. And now then suddenly, right, in the modern world, we have to deal with, or we get to deal with, right, people who don't look like us, don't talk like us, don't believe what we do. And it's not that that's a brand new problem, but it is a new issue for more and more people. And that is going to put stresses on people's moral habits, on their cognitive habits, and so forth. So, in one sense, the issue of tolerance and putting up with, or the issue of being open-minded and celebrating the fact that now you can try 40 different kinds of cuisine instead of just eating your traditional cuisine. But we do know that some people are from the get-go resistant to trying new kinds of foods. And so it's a cognitive risk, right, and a physiological risk that they're not willing to engage in. So that's a new mental or a mindset, to use the concept you introduced a little bit earlier in the question. So what I think is that the modern world obviously is stressing or enabling and accelerating lots of perennial human issues. But if your philosophy is accurate from the get-go, you can handle them better than philosophies that are more, I don't want to say all traditions are bad, but are more tradition-minded and have an unprepared for the modern world philosophical mindset. Those are the people who are finding it hard to adapt to the modern world, and who are traditionally the ones saying that pretty much everything that happens in the modern world is problematic and to be slowed down or retarded in various ways.
It sounds a lot like Brussels for us on
Mm.
this side of the pond.
Yes, I know what you mean. Yeah, a centralized, right, system, and partly there is an issue of elitism, right? Whether hoi polloi or the common
Yes,
people are able to manage their own lives, and then of course there are all of the problems of bureaucracies, right? Once they get in place and they have some power, they never want to give it up, and you have in many cases, the small-minded bureaucratic mindset, right? To control and regulate. That's very much not an innovation, entrepreneurship friendly mindset. So yes, there's a
definitely
whole set of
not.
problems there.
Definitely not. And you make a very good point that I really would like to explore a little bit further. Um, in the best way to innovate, to drive forward the natural human drive for progress.
Hmm.
I don't know if we go forward backwards, but there is this drive to
Hmm.
discover, to to push boundaries. Um, what is the role that the authorities, the government, should play in business ethics proper,
Hmm. Yeah.
in your view?
Right. Well, I think there's a legitimate role for government with respect to business, just as I think there's a legitimate role for government with respect to human life in general. So, human beings act and interact with each other. And so the first question is, what are my responsibilities as an individual? And so if your ethic starts with saying, well, my life is mine, it's my responsibility. I need to think for myself, figure out my core values. I need to show initiative to create the values that I think I want in my life, and then enjoy the fruits of my labor in all areas. This would include business, my friendships, my romance, my family, sporting activities, intellectual activities, religious activities, artistic activities, and so on. So I think the first place to talk about ethics is to get your understanding of the proper responsibility of individuals. Now, if that's your starting point, then you'll say, when we start talking about a government, and governments are there are two differentia that focus on the key traits about government. One is that government is meant to be an umbrella institution, applying to everybody in the society, right, that we're talking about. We've got lots of particular social institutions that we engage in, right? We go to sports teams and we do business here, and we go to these social clubs, and maybe we go to religious institutions. So there's lots of things that we do socially, but those are all very particular, and they'll have their own rules and bylaws, so to speak. But government is overseeing all of them. The
Yeah.
other thing that differentiates government is their use of force. They have the police, and the police are armed, and they can arrest you and take you physically to jail and take you to court, and they can confiscate your property. They can kill you in the most
Yeah.
extreme cases. Whereas ordinarily we think of other social institutions, they can discommunicate themselves from you, or dissociate themselves, say, I fire you, or I quit this job, or I don't want to be your friend anymore, right? Or we're kicking you off the team because we don't want to play sports with you. But they can't put you in jail. They can't execute you, or they can't confiscate your property. So
Correct.
uh, the proper the question then is, under what circumstances do we want to say that there's a social institution that can use force against people? Right? What things are so bad that the use of force by an institution is authorized, or is the proper
Yes.
response? And these principles are not optional. You can't opt in and out of them, like you can opt in and out of using this dry cleaners or that dry cleaners, or joining this sports team or joining that sports team, or being friends with this person or being friends with that person. These are not optional in and out, right, rules. Everybody has to follow these rules. So if your starting point, though, is to say individuals are responsible for their lives and should be free in their lives, then the answer to the proper function of government is going to be, the job of government is to protect individuals as they are freely and responsibly going about their lives.
Yeah.
So, so I should be able to think for myself. I should be able to have friendships with whomever I want, start whatever businesses I want. And as long as my doing that is not interfering, and this is obviously needs to be worked out, or
Yeah.
preventing someone else from exercising the same responsibility in their life, then there's not a role for government. But if I'm trying to kill you, right, if I'm trying to steal from you, if I'm trying to kidnap you, if I'm trying to coerce you in some way that stops you from doing the normal responsible things in your life, then arguably there's a role for government there. Now,
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely. Now, here is something that I've been wanting to to ask you for a long time, way
Mm.
before this podcast, and is part of the ethical behavior of a business to not take complete care, but to contribute to ameliorate the externalities of their business.
Yeah.
And I think this is we don't know if robotics and AI will create a mass of unemployed people. But let's take that example. Should businesses play a role in ameliorating those effects, those negative effects, or is their role circumscribed
Yeah.
to do their best product um, for the time being?
Yeah. Well, that's a big and huge question, and again, it takes us to the foundations of business ethics, and it takes us to the foundations of human social interactions as well. So, to the extent that we are pursuing our values, sometimes we pursue our values in a way that's totally independent
Yeah,
of other people. So I might, in the evening, retreat to my study and listen to some music and drink a glass of wine. Right. So I'm not doing anything socially. If, for example, though, I am going to retreat to my living room with my wife and listen to some music and have a glass of wine, then immediately there are some more complications. Hopefully they're happy conversations, but it's going to be, what music are we going to listen to? And so there's going to be some negotiation there, or what wine should we have tonight?
yeah,
Right. And if we can't agree, for example, on what music we want to listen to, then we might say, well, why don't you put your headphones on and I'll put my headphones on? And, this is not going to be a shared music night, for example. So in that case, if I said no, I'm going to just listen to my music, and I crank it up to the volume being so loud such that she can't listen to what music she wants to that night. Then in that sense, I am creating an externality, right? So I'm pursuing my value, but the sound is very loud, and that's affecting her, and that's what we call it an externality. So how do we solve externalities in the simplest, right, of cases like that? And working out, short-term and long-term values, what's properly hers and what's properly mine, working out what the relationship means to us. In one sense, there's not going to be a formula that is right for all couples in all of those circumstances. So all you can say is, there are general principles that the philosophers are going to work out. Well, she's a human being with her natural interests, and pursuing music is one of them. I'm a human being, but at the same time, we've decided we are in a marriage, and that means a certain kind of commitment to each other. And what does that mean in general, but also in thousands and thousands of things that come up in the course of a marriage as well? So you can say there are general principles about what make a marriage work, but at the same time, a huge amount of that needs to be worked out by the couple involved, and there's going to be a huge amount of variation that's possible there. Now,
absolutely.
if we then start saying, let's go to other more simple kinds of examples, and here I'm quite happy to say that human beings have been working these things out for thousands of years. So if we are worried about, for example, externalities in the case of AI and robotics, part of it will be the answer to that will be reflecting on the long tradition of the mores that human beings have worked out. And then in the more complicated cases where it has gone to courts of law because people couldn't work it out using like normal conversation or whatever. What are the principles of common law that have been worked out over the course of the centuries, and can they apply to these new
Exactly.
values and so on? So, to go back to simple examples, we might say, you and I are neighbors and we're both farmers. And this is then a very traditional example, and we're going to have millions and millions of examples of this. So Maybe I am a cow farmer, and I don't know, you are a corn farmer. So you're raising corn, and I'm growing cows, and we're next to each other. But maybe traditionally, the boundary between our properties was a stream, and you were using the stream for your corn, and I was using the stream for my cows to drink. Now, one kind of issue there is going to be, have we got it worked out to whom the stream belongs? Is it that this was first my stream, and then you came along later and you negotiated some rights to use the water? Or is it the other way around? And then there's going to be one set of principles for solving problems that arise if that's our situation. If it's the case that we both showed up at more or less the same time, and the stream, we just said that's the boundary and we're both going to use it, then we have a kind of commons in that case, and there's no clear property right. And when problems arise, then we're going to have to work those things out. So one kind of problem that is going to arise is normally the stream flows plentifully, but one year there wasn't much rain in the spring, or there wasn't very much snow melt, so there's not enough water for both of us. Now, so how do we solve that problem? And we can say, well, there's an externality there, because if my cows then drink a huge amount, or if you drain off a huge amount of water and put it in a giant cistern because you want to make sure you've got water for your corn all year, then we have another kind of problem. And that's another kind of externality that can arise. Yeah. Maybe it's the case that you start using a pesticide on your corn, and that runs off into the water, and that might be a toxin for my cows. Or, conversely, my cows produce a lot of manure, and I put it in a big manure pile, but every time there's a big rain, some of it leaks into the water, right, and so on. So then we're getting into pollution issues. So what I would say is, every new technology, right, raises these issues of human interaction, but I would avoid saying that this is a brand new problem that human beings have never faced before. What we should be able to do is go back and look at how have human beings worked out these problems in multiple societies across multiple generations, and can we learn from them? Exactly. So in the case of AI, for example, artificial intelligence, one kind of issue there is that just in the last generation or so, we've developed the internet. And everybody's putting all of their information on the internet. And one of the things that we weren't necessarily too careful about was what information that I'm putting on the internet is my private information. And so I have a private property right to that information. And what information am I putting it out there publicly, so to speak? So it's kind of joining an information commons. But that's not a new problem. That just is to say, information is a value. And sometimes on values, we have sorted out property rights. And sometimes with respect to those values, they are in a commons. And so right now, all of that information that has been put out there by billions of people, some of it is on private networks and some of it is in a commons. But then some people at the same time have put all of that information out there willingly, but now they're having second thoughts and they would like to make that information private again. So this is a new wrinkle on an old problem, but it is an old problem. And so when we're talking about information ethics and property rights and the common status of information, again, we should be drawing on what we have learned throughout the huge amount of human history. Absolutely. And so then if we say, for example, some forward-thinking companies are saying, well, obviously this information has value for advertising, for sorting out human preferences, for psychology research and various other kinds of research and so on. And maybe I have a knowledge motive and I want to scrape a lot of information to do my scientific research, or maybe I have a profit motive. I want to scrape a lot of information so that I can sell more targeted advertises to business. So there are lots of people with lots of motives out there. How to sort that out? That's just, so to speak, a new wrinkle on an old problem. Now, the same, I don't want to talk too much. The analogy I
I
sometimes
want you
also,
to talk too much.
but
I
it's
learn
amazing
every
how to take
time
the
you talk.
conversation in different directions. Right? And so that then is to say, by analogy, the information in that case is a value like the water in the stream that's running between our two proper problems. Another analogy, though, would be to say pollution. Suppose there's some pesticide runoff from your herbicides, or there's some manure runoff from my cows. So the analogy there would be to people who are coming up with new AI algorithms or new kinds of software, and if they then, so to speak, put it out there on the internet is like the stream, right? And then that goes everywhere. But what happens if there are problems with the algorithm, right? It's a virus in some way, intentionally or not intentionally, and it
Yes.
starts damaging other people's systems or damaging their reputation. It's introducing, so to speak, pollution into what we want to be a clean information stream rather than a polluted water type of stream, to keep the analogy there. So then again, pollution control is something that we've worked on for a long time. And sabotage of water systems is something that we've worked on for a long time.
Yes.
So unintentional or intentional polluting or sabotaging of the internet, and people who are working in AI, of course, they have to be attentive to that issue, and it should be in part a job of business ethicists to help them work their way through. The way I generally I think a nice analogy here is if you think about something more sophisticated and more recent is biology. And so all of the discoveries we've made in biology and genetics and microbiology and, customizing biological molecules and life forms and so forth. So all of this is a huge and exciting new area. And just as when we are working in our biological lab, we're working with bacteria, right, or we're working with viruses, or we're working right with whatever. It's pretty normal to say, okay, we can make these things better, or we can make new ones. But at the same time, these things are new, and we don't know what's going to happen once certain kinds of bacteria or viruses are just like, put out there into the ecosystem, right, so to speak. So we do now have several generations of protocols that have been worked out when you are doing biological research, right? About how much testing you do, how many levels of insulation you do before you release things to the general public, what kinds of oversight including in some cases government oversight as well. So what I would say is then, by analogy, as we are working out this new internet thing and all of the information and programs that are going to be out there and all of the new algorithms and so on, that what should be going on in the AI labs is parallel to what goes on in biotech labs. That we can learn from more than 2 centuries of sophisticated biological research about what the proper protocols are, and then start applying those to AI algorithms.
That is very, very right. And I haven't heard anyone bring that up.
Okay.
I,
Well,
I
I'm going to declare that my intellectual property, and anybody who
absolutely.
uses that idea has to pay me a royalty.
It's recorded.
I'm just
I'll go.
anticipating one of your future questions here.
I'll go to court and testify in your favor. I like a lot how you put it, um, because there is implicit or quite explicit in what you said that business ethics is not a monolithic dead discipline. Is evolving. It has a rich pedigree,
Hmm.
solving things that may not sound like what we're facing today, but in essence, they're the same. They're the same
Yes.
dilemma, and on top of that wealth of information, there is this dynamic element. that will always be adapting to new challenges.
Hmm.
And I think that removes the edge. Yeah, this is my opinion. And like 99% of my opinions, it's likely wrong. But I think that we are better prepared than what we think, because
Hmm.
there is a lot of buzz. There is a lot of, of fear in this brave new world that we're facing. But it is quite sobering to realize what you say. We have the tools, we have the experience, and at the end of the day, we have to tackle them nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's very well said, I think. Yeah.
I love it. I like a lot. I like a lot how you put it, and I think that's something that is not only for business ethicists; it's for
Hmm.
technologists, politicians. Desperately need to understand this,
Oh, yeah.
and for everyday people who are terrified or who are into the hype. That's another extreme that is not healthy either.
Hmm.
What is you answer this implicitly already. What is the future of business ethicists now in this information age where you will cough and the world will find out on X that
Hmm.
Facebook is dead? Do you see a revival of the business ethicist at the helm of big corporations, especially now when all these AI companies and robotics companies are in some sort of arms race?
Hmm.
Is it time for the professional business ethicist to take a seat at the board?
Hmm.
Is it that time?
Yeah, I think so. Yes. As things become more technical, more complicated, and more professionalized in all of these areas, then I think yeah, good combination of people on the board is the phrase I'm looking for. Will integrate people who have all of those expertises. So
Yes.
people who, right, who know the production side, the marketing side, and have experience there, and the government relations side, and so on. But then also, to the extent that there are ongoing ethical issues that are new, not necessarily new issues, but new wrinkles on traditional issues, then I think yes, finding someone who has thought through those issues and having that person be a voice on the board is value adding. I think that is important, but I think it is less important than education of everybody who is in the business organization. So one,
Very good point.
yeah, so there's one thing to have an ethics coach or an ethics advisor, uh, um, uh, and then people more formally on the board, so that they're constantly looking at it from that perspective and highlighting the related issues there. But people who are executives, managers, and so on already have a huge amount of responsibility and they're thinking about these issues constantly. And so
Yes.
their background preparation for doing so, I think, is the more important value. So the thing I think more about has been if you think, for example, about AI, and right now the kind of education, and this might be a little bit stereotypical, but the kind of person who is going to start a new AI company is someone who loves computers, loves math, right? Probably all through their school was not paying attention to in history class because it was boring, right? Wasn't paying attention in literature class because didn't like reading, right? Big books. Maybe was a little bit socially awkward, right? So wasn't developing social skills. this is total stereotype, right? Maybe, right? Wasn't very athletic, right? And wasn't playing on sports teams and learning all of the lessons there. So if you think of the kind of person who was a nerd, I was like a philosophy nerd as a young person, but very good at computers, at mathematics, at the new technologies, at science fiction, and so on, and inspired by all of that, and then goes to a strong computer science program or a strong engineering program, and again gets a very narrow but high tech education, and then gets a new idea because this person's at the forefront of everything for a new kind of product or service, and says, I can start a company, and gets a few $1 million in angel investing or venture capital, and then starts the company. And the company is very quickly successful and suddenly has 10,000 employees and is dealing with governments and has offices all over the world. That person is in the midst of the full range of human challenges, human potential, and human problems, but does not have the education to handle them. So, what I would rather see is what's going on at the college level education, and even before that, be more well rounded humanistic education, as I think of it. That
Yes.
from the get go, right, it's fine to be a prodigy in some area or other, but people who are parents and teachers from the beginning need to make sure that that person has a well-rounded life. And it's not only because they might become future entrepreneurs, but because they want that person to live a full life at the same time, have their area of expertise. But more problematically, I think there is some education reform that's necessary in the more technical and professional parts of higher education. Because I, it's now becoming apparent, not necessarily problematically, that lots and lots of people who are the most powerful people in business right now had a very narrow education. And they might be very smart, but they are learning on the fly how to deal with all
Yes.
kinds of ethical and political challenge as well.
Yes. Does that mean that we can expect in the future a new Hicks original on business ethics for budding computer nerds?
Uh, well, yes. Yeah, the way I approach this, and this is some of my recent publications, is through the theme of entrepreneurism. At my university, almost 2 decades ago, I started a new teaching and research center called the Center for Ethics and Entrepreneurship. And precisely
Yes.
the idea was to integrate entrepreneurship from the business side with ethics from the philosophy side as well. But if we come back to issues of AI and robotics, one of the things that we are worried about is all of the blue collar jobs that are going to be displaced, and
Yes.
even all of the routine office jobs, all of the routine white collar jobs that are going to be displaced as well. So my recommendation there is that if you're a person who likes to work with his hands, you don't want an office job. Don't see the robots as a threat to you. That there is that mind shift. You have to start seeing robots and all of the new machines as your friends. And your attitude should be not, I don't want to have to think about things anymore. I want to have a skill set and just do the same job for the next 40 years until I retire. That's not realistic. That's also not good for you as a human being. Right?
Correct.
Right? You're destroying yourself, and you're just setting yourself up from a lifetime of boredom. Rather, to see that you are in a very interesting technological world, and if you like to work with your hands and robotics and all of the new machines, embrace that so that you can have a flourishing career. But that means you have to have an entrepreneurial mindset about robotics. The same thing about people who are in the white collar sector, as we call it, office jobs. Again, you don't think that you're just going to finish your education, go work in a cubicle, and shuffle paper in the same way for 40 years and then retire. That's
Yeah.
not good for you as a human being. Instead, embrace the new softwares, the new tools that are coming out, so that you can be entrepreneurial in whatever sector that you want to work. It's not only the tech geniuses who are starting all of the new companies, the traditional entrepreneurs who need to be entrepreneurial. We all need to be entrepreneurial. So that then is to say, if we're talking about the things that go into being entrepreneurial, curiosity, right, a willingness to experiment, willingness to fail a lot until you get things right, right? Having that perseverance to see things through until you do get it right. All of those mindset issues, those are what we should be focusing on from the very beginnings of education all the way through and formalizing it. And
Yeah.
then at the same time, making sure our institutions, including our legal institutions, political institutions, but also our softer mores, are reinforcing that in all sorts of ways. So that's where I'm working on right now.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Do I sense optimism from you? Are we at the brink of a new era of human flourishing from your
Yeah, I think
perspective?
so. Yeah, absolutely. So, if you think, 90, sorry, two centuries ago, the 90 number is, and this is a bit of a rounding issue, but 90% of human beings worked in agriculture.
Yes.
And, the big human challenge was just making enough food to put food on the table and get us through the winter, right? And so forth. And now, less than 2% in the developed countries of the population works in agriculture.
Yes.
So we might then say 2 centuries ago, when we're looking at that generation of new information, new algorithms, new machines, and so forth. But what about all of the people working on the farm? And aren't they going to be put out of jobs? And then we say, well, yes. But are they happy working on the farm? Right? Is everybody a natural farmer? Right? Or is it the case that all of the new machines and technologies are creating all kinds of new businesses and new ventures that are in fact more interesting for
Yes.
human beings? And
Yes.
so, and for those who are willing to learn new things and maybe leave the farm, which has got some security, and go seek out opportunities, are they not better off? And then the data shows that, over the course of the next generations, yes, the vast majority of people are doing much more interesting jobs and making a lot more money as a result of that revolution in agriculture. The
Yes.
same thing with respect to going back to transportation. Everybody, all of the people looking after horses and growing horse feed, and all of the blacksmiths making shoes for all of the horses, carrying all of the carriages, right, and so forth. And then along comes the horseless carriage. And say, are we now then 2 or 3 generations better off with people doing more interesting jobs and actually a much bigger transportation sector? And we say, well, it was tough for some of the blacksmiths that had to adjust, and all of the veterinarians who specialized in horses, right, who suddenly didn't have as much clientele. Now they have to do other things and learn to work on other animals and so on. But they're better off. And I think the same thing is true of this generation. Yes, robotics is going to take away a lot of jobs. AI is going to take away a lot of traditional jobs. But what is harder for us to anticipate is that all of those new robots on all those new machines, they need engineers to invent them. They need scientists to discover the knowledge, and they need entrepreneurs to bring them to market. And each of
Yes.
those entrepreneurs is going to hire secretaries and administrative assistants and salespeople and so forth. So every new technology brings with it a whole raft of new jobs. It's just that we don't know what those jobs are right now.
Exactly.
So I think in 20 years we will be through this particular iteration, and it will be exciting times. So I'm
Is it
optimistic. Yes.
That's fantastic? Could we say that the keys going forward are curiosity and the ability to adapt?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And this is one of the stresses, so to speak, of the modern world. It can be a positive stress or not. So going right back to pre-Columbian times. So I like to use the date 1500, just because so much was happening religiously, scientifically, exploration, and so on around 1500 and before. It's fascinating if you go to the 1400s and you read a lot of the literature, and not to beat up on religious people, but a lot of the religious literature. Curiosity was a bad word. Right? Innovation, right, was a bad word. Almost all of the time, you see the word innovator in pre 1500s literature. It has an adjective in front of it, and that adjective is rash, right? Rash innovator, right?
Yeah,
With the idea that that's a pejorative of some sense. So sometimes curiosity is not an acquired habit for some people. This is why I do think childhood education is so important, right? Rather than
correct.
killing curiosity. That terrible old adage or that cliche that children should be seen and not heard. Right? No, I think children should be heard. And even if you're a
Yes,
parent and your kids get to 3, 4, and 5, and they just have this barrage of question, 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 question. And yeah, and you do get tired and you want the kid just to shut up for 2 minutes so you can enjoy your coffee in peace. Resist that, right? And don't stifle that in any way. And then recasting the education models. Let me just digress a little bit to formal education. Right now, if you ask most people to form an image of school, going to school and imagining kids in school, 99% of people will immediately go to a certain image of a classroom with desks in a row and students sitting in the row, sitting in their desks, and they all have the same book open, and the teacher is standing up at the front of the room giving a talk or writing stuff on the board. And all of the kids are supposed to be listening passively or reading from the textbook, which the authority tells them what the truth is, and working on the same problems and doing those problems in the same way and getting the same answer. And they're going to be tested. And if they fail that test, they are going to suffer grief and they have to ask permission to go to the bathroom, right? And so on. So that's the stereotype. And again, I'm overstating the stereotype in some way. But the question is, what kind of people are we trying to create if we put kids in 12 years or more of that education? And by the time they are 17 or 18, and then we send them out into the world, does that education create curious people?
not
People
at
who
all.
are experimental, people who are not afraid to fail and do a lot of trial and error, who feel free to do whatever they want, right, and so forth? Or is it going to be the exact opposite of that? So, yes, curiosity historically has been beaten up on by many of the business ethics. No, just do your job, do what you are told, right? Don't
Yes,
question authority. But it's also been reinforced even in the modern world by much of our education establishment. So all of that, I think, needs to be rethought. And then, of course, you were mentioning Brussels earlier. We do live in a kind of a bureaucracy on steroids business environment in many parts of the world now. And
yes,
bureaucracies we know are about compliance. And to the extent that we have more and more bureaucracy and more enforcement, what that means for business is not, I'm going to experiment and try stuff and do it and then beg forgiveness later, or you can trust me to do normal precautions. Instead, all of the mindset and the resources are shifted toward complying with one size fits all rules that are imposed from top down, and that's just an anti-innovation social
absolutely,
environment.
absolutely. And quite ironic, the old educational model was about creating robots But now that we have real robots, we need to do away with the old robots that we were
Yeah,
ourselves.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh,
And one other reason I'm optimistic right now is that I think just in this last generation, there's been a lot of awareness of how underperforming most traditional education systems have been. There's been a lot of benefit of the doubt over the course of the 20th century. About expending huge amounts of resources and not getting very much by way of return in the traditional education models. But people are now aware of the underperformance, and in some cases, the anti-education that is going on. And so we're starting to see a lot more experimenting and a lot of entrepreneurial activity in the education space. And
oh
I think
yes.
that is all for the good.
And you are part, actually, yourself of a really, really good experiment right now.
Well, yeah, trying as much as I can. Yep. Yeah.
And we'll see the fruits of that pretty soon, if not already.
Great. Well,
People
thanks for that.
people don't have time to sit at a classroom. They gotta do stuff.
Mm,
That's my perception. I do hope that Europe catches up because
mm.
there's a lot of talent. There's a
Oh,
lot
goodness.
of yearning.
Oh, yeah. Human capital in Europe is just amazing.
It's
Just amazing.
incredible.
Yeah.
We just need to get rid of the shackles.
Yeah. That's no. Europe is definitely underperforming at
Yes,
at this point. Yeah.
in all the metrics.
Yeah.
I think that's a very positive message, and that's what I like a lot about chatting with you.
Okay. Great. Well, it's a mutual pleasure, sir.
A contraire, well, no, if it's mutual, it's not a contraire. I understand that you're pressure for time, Stephen.
Somewhat, yes. Unfortunately.
Yes, and I just want to say that every time I chat with you, I feel like I need to hang on the wall a PhD diploma. Thank you very much for that.
Again,
Thank
good
you very
fun.
much for your time,
Great range. Yeah. And
and I will continue following closely everything you do.
great. And we, of course, will stay in touch.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Every time you have problem with insomnia, I'm here to talk.
Oh, you are too modest. It's the exact opposite of that.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much,
Javier.
Stephen.
Until next time.